Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar metals and ancient stone. The walls of the alien ship pulsed with a faint blue glow, as if the very structure of the vessel itself was alive. Captain Elias Carter, a grizzled veteran of the United Earth Forces, was silently making his way through the labyrinthine corridors of the alien dreadnought. The ship, captured during humanity's first major skirmish with the Zorith, a race of cold, calculating, and technologically superior extraterrestrials, had become a crucial point of study for Earth's military. Carter had been selected to oversee the final mission, infiltrating the heart of the Zorith Queen's lair to gather intelligence on their most feared weapon. What was most peculiar was that despite their technology, the Zorith remained a mystery. Their hive-like culture had been built around the Queen, an entity whose intelligence and power surpassed any terrestrial mind. No one truly understood how the Queen governed, nor why they had waged war on humanity in the first place. The data captured in previous battles told a vague story, one of brutal efficiency and relentless drive, but never why. Now, standing at the edge of an enormous chamber that could have fit an entire battalion, Carter felt the full weight of the unknown press against him. He adjusted the weight of his pulse rifle, the familiar hum of the advanced weapon offering little comfort. This wasn't just a routine mission to retrieve intel, it was a psychological and biological gamble. If the Queen were truly as dangerous as humanity's enemies claimed, Carter might not be leaving this ship alive. A sudden sound broke the silence. The low hum of machinery resonated from deep within the ship, and Carter's breath caught in his throat. There, at the far end of the chamber, the shadows parted, revealing a grand throne-like structure that seemed to have grown out of the very walls. Atop it sat the Zorith Queen, her form towering and sinuous, a being of dark, reflective exoskeletons and pulsating veins of a blue, bioluminescent substance. She exuded an otherworldly presence, a terrifying mixture of intellect, age, and power. Her eyes, glowing a faint violet, locked onto Carter as if she had known he was coming for an eternity. Carter's heart hammered in his chest, but he stood firm, knowing that hesitation would be his doom. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure as his mind raced to comprehend what he was seeing. Despite her terrifying appearance, the Queen seemed calm, almost regal. She did not move, nor did she speak, but Carter could feel her gaze penetrate through him, like she was dissecting his very soul. The chamber felt impossibly vast, but he knew there was no escape. Even if he turned around and ran, the Zorith would have anticipated his every move. The only option left was to approach her, to try and extract whatever intelligence he could from her strange alien mind. "Why?" he whispered, more to himself than to the Queen. "Why did you start this war? What do you want from us?" The Zorith Queen tilted her head slightly, a slow, deliberate movement that somehow sent chills down Carter's spine. He could sense the immense intelligence behind her gaze, as if she were pondering whether to answer him or to destroy him outright. For a long moment, there was only silence, and then she spoke in a voice that seemed to echo from all directions at once. "Human," she said, her tone both calm and unsettlingly warm. "You seek answers, but you lack the understanding of your own limitations. I did not start this war." "You did?" Carter's mind reeled. He had expected everything but that response. "What do you mean?" He took a step forward, lowering his weapon slightly. "We were only defending ourselves. Your fleet attacked Earth, your people invaded our space. Your species is more dangerous than you realize," the Queen continued, her voice sending a ripple through the air. "In your arrogance, you believe that your expansion into the cosmos was inevitable. But you fail to understand that there are forces beyond your comprehension, beyond your technologies. You are a child trying to play in a game meant for gods." Carter's stomach churned as the weight of her words began to sink in. He had always believed that humanity was justified in its expansion, seeking new territories, new resources to secure their future. Yet here, in the cold heart of the Zorith ship, the Queen's words made him question everything. Was humanity really the innocent party in this war? Or was there something deeper at play? The Queen's eyes glowed brighter, and she shifted ever so slightly in her throne, her sharp mandibles clicking in a slow rhythm. "You ask why," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to carry across dimensions. "You ask why your species was chosen. The answer is simple. You are both the catalyst and the test." Carter's pulse quickened. "Test? What kind of test?" The Queen's lips curled into a slow, predatory smile. Captain Elias Carter's hand tightened around the grip of his pulse rifle, the weapon now feeling like an inadequate tool in this surreal moment. He had expected aggression. He had expected a battle. But the Zorith Queen's words struck him like a hammer to the chest. His mind was spinning, trying to reconcile what he had been trained to believe with the unsettling truth that she had just spoken. "You are both the catalyst and the test," she had said, her voice an eerie echo that seemed to reverberate through his very bones. The phrase repeated in his mind as if mocking him. He could barely grasp the full meaning, but he knew it was something monumental. He had to understand. Test. His voice was shaky but firm, a fragile thread of defiance against the weight of her presence. "What do you mean by that? Why would you attack us, destroy our worlds just to test us?" The Zorith Queen didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied him with a look that seemed almost pitying, as though she was amused by his confusion. The air in the chamber grew heavier, the oppressive silence deepening. Slowly, her mandibles clicked, a sound like the clicking of ancient gears, and she leaned forward from her throne, her long, segmented body undulating with smooth, terrifying grace. "Human," she said, her voice taking on a softer, almost coaxing tone, "you have come to understand so little, and yet you believe you know everything about the universe. You have traveled the stars with your crude vessels, you have laid claim to worlds that were never meant for you. But you have not seen what lies beyond the veil of your understanding. You have not seen the true power of the cosmos." Carter felt a cold sweat begin to bead on his brow as he tried to absorb her words. His fingers gripped the rifle harder, though he knew in his heart that it was futile. Against this creature, this ancient force, it might as well have been a toy. His training had always taught him to trust his instincts, but now those instincts were at war with the truth she was offering, truths he had never once considered. "What are you trying to say?" he pressed, his voice strained. "That we're somehow unworthy of the stars? That we've made a mistake by defending ourselves?" The Queen's eyes gleamed, their violet hue glowing brighter with each passing second, like stars coming to life. She tilted her head slightly as though studying him with new interest. "You do not understand, Captain. You are not merely defending yourself. You are forging the path for your species, and for others, towards something far greater or far worse depending on how you fare." Carter's mind reeled. Something greater? Something worse? What could she possibly mean by that? He wasn't prepared to handle an intellectual or philosophical debate. He was trained to fight, to kill if necessary, to survive. This alien, this queen, was playing with his mind, twisting reality in ways he wasn't equipped to handle. The Queen's voice seemed to resonate in the very marrow of his bones. "There are forces, races, civilizations out there, hidden in the folds of reality. They watch, always watching, waiting for the right moment. Your species, with its unquenchable thirst for expansion, has drawn their attention. You are a beacon now, Captain. A beacon for something much older, much more powerful than anything you have yet encountered. And the test? The test is whether you can endure it." Carter's breath quickened. Endure what? He was no longer sure if he was asking the question for himself or as a means of stalling, trying to buy time to understand what the Queen was saying. "Survival," she answered simply. "The only true measure of intelligence in the universe is the ability to survive the test of time, the test of adversity. To endure what no species should endure. To adapt, to evolve, to transcend the limits of your biology, your mind, your culture." Carter shook his head, his mind swimming in confusion. "You're saying you're testing us? That this whole war, the destruction, the bloodshed was all a game to you?" "It was never a game, human," the Queen replied, her voice sharp and commanding. "You misunderstand. It is not a test for my people. It is a test for yours." The implications of her words were like a heavy weight pressing down on him, his chest tightening as he tried to piece together the fragments of the Queen's cryptic explanation. A test for humanity. But why? Why had the Zorith gone to such lengths, destroying human colonies, slaughtering thousands of soldiers, for something so abstract? The Queen's gaze softened, but only slightly. "You are on the cusp of something far beyond the capabilities of your race. But you are not ready yet. Not by a long shot. I will show you what you are meant to become, Captain. But first you must prove you are worthy of it. You must prove that you can survive what is coming." Carter's mind was struggling to comprehend. He thought about Earth, the human colonies spread across distant planets, the families torn apart by this brutal conflict. To think that it all had been leading up to this moment, to some cosmic test, seemed insane. "How?" he finally asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "How do we prove ourselves?" The Queen leaned forward, her voice dropping to a soft, almost reverent tone. "By surviving what you do not yet understand. By facing forces older than your civilization, forces beyond your comprehension, and emerging unbroken. You are the experiment, Captain, and you are not the first." Carter's heart pounded in his chest. Not the first? Who else? The Queen gave a slight, cryptic smile, her mandibles clicking again. You will see, Captain. You will see soon enough. But remember, your survival is not guaranteed. Not even for the most prepared of species. For the first time, Carter felt a deep, unsettling chill run through him. He wasn't just caught in a war with the Zorth. He was part of something much larger, something that transcended any conflict he had ever known. The test of humanity had begun. Carter stood frozen, the weight of the Zorth Queen's words pressing down on him with unbearable intensity. His mind raced, struggling to connect the pieces of the puzzle that were rapidly shifting and expanding in ways he could not yet comprehend. The Zorth had invaded Earth, and now the Queen was telling him it was part of something larger, a test of humanity's survival. He had been prepared for war, for bloodshed, for tactics and strategy. But this was beyond his training. Who else? He whispered again, the words tumbling from his mouth as he sought any shred of clarity. Who else has faced this test? The Queen's violet eyes glowed brighter, the light reflecting off the jagged ridges of her exoskeleton like a distant star. She didn't answer immediately, as though savoring the moment, watching him squirm under the pressure of his own confusion. Not all tests are the same, Captain, she said softly. Some species were crushed by the weight of their own ignorance. Some, through arrogance, turned their backs on the challenge and faced extinction. Others were stronger than we anticipated. Carter's pulse quickened. What do you mean by stronger? The Queen's mandibles clicked again, the sound echoing in the chamber. She leaned forward, her presence overwhelming, filling the space with an almost tangible energy. I do not seek your annihilation, Captain. I seek your transformation. There are forces in the universe far greater than my own, and the test is not simply whether you can survive us. It is whether you can survive what comes next. A cold chill crept through Carter's body. The war against the Zorth had already stretched humanity to its limits. But now he was being told that there were other threats, hidden forces lurking just beyond the veil of comprehension. The idea that Earth might face an even greater danger than the Zorth was almost too much to process. But we're fighting you, Carter said, his voice tinged with disbelief. What do you want from us? What test could possibly follow this? The Queen's voice became deeper, resonating through the chamber like the rumble of distant thunder. The Zorth were never your true enemy, Captain. We are but a mere catalyst, a doorway to the trials ahead. The true test will come when you stand alone without our interference. Only then will you understand what it means to truly survive. Carter felt his stomach churn, the weight of her words sinking in like a stone in water. He had fought in countless battles, seen the faces of the fallen, watched entire worlds burn. But the idea that their struggle, everything they had fought for, was just the beginning of something far worse, something beyond even the Zorth's reach, was almost incomprehensible. Why tell me all this? Carter asked, his voice more steady than he felt. Why reveal it now? Why not let humanity face its fate without warning? The Queen tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as though pondering his question. Because, Captain, humanity's greatest strength is also its greatest flaw. You are driven by curiosity, by a need to understand, to explore the unknown. It is that drive that will either make you, or break you. A surge of defiance filled Carter. His mind flashed back to Earth, his home. The people he had fought for, the loved ones lost in the conflict. He couldn't accept the idea that humanity might be doomed by forces they couldn't even begin to understand. We're not some experiment, he shouted, though his voice sounded small against the overwhelming presence of the Queen. We choose our fate. We'll fight, we'll survive. No one will decide for us. For the briefest moment, the Queen's expression softened. A hint of something almost like admiration flickered in her violet eyes. Then just as quickly, it vanished, replaced by the cold, unyielding nature that defined her kind. Survival is not a matter of choice, Captain. It is the result of an unyielding will to adapt, to evolve. The Zorth know this. We have fought and endured for eons. But you are still so young. Your species is in its infancy. You have not yet reached your full potential. She paused, and in that silence, Carter could feel something stirring beneath the surface of the conversation. The air in the chamber shifted again, thick with a strange energy, and Carter couldn't help but feel as though he was standing on the precipice of something vast, something terrifying. It wasn't just about surviving this war or defeating the Zorth. It was about something much bigger, something that had been set in motion long before humanity even knew the stars existed. The Queen leaned back in her throne, her gaze never leaving Carter. You will soon be tested, Captain. And when that time comes, I will not be your enemy. I will be your guide and perhaps, if you prove worthy, your ally. But remember this, the universe does not care for your species' fragile notions of morality. It is not a question of right or wrong. It is a question of survival. Carter clenched his fists, fighting to keep his composure. Every part of him wanted to lash out at this creature, this alien that seemed to hold the fate of humanity in her grasp. But he knew it would be pointless. She was not his enemy, not directly at least. She was something far more complex, a force of nature that saw things on a scale that humanity had yet to even begin to understand. Tell me what I need to do, Carter said, his voice steady now, resolute. Tell me how to survive this test. The Queen's lips curled into a faint, cryptic smile. The path will not be easy. You must go back to your people. Lead them, if you can, through the storm that is coming. You must prepare them for what lies ahead. For when the time comes, Captain, they will be the ones who must decide whether humanity survives. Carter's heart raced, but now he was more certain than ever that his role in this vast cosmic game had only just begun. He wasn't just fighting for Earth's survival anymore. He was fighting for the future of all mankind, for the chance to prove that humanity could rise above its limitations, to reach for something beyond the stars. But as the Queen's gaze held him in its grip, Carter realized that the path ahead was fraught with peril, and the cost of failure might be beyond anything he could imagine. Captain Elias Carter stepped back from the Zorith Queen's throne, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The chamber around him seemed to pulse with a strange, hypnotic energy, as if the very walls were alive and watching him. He had come here expecting answers, but what he had found was far more troubling. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were being tested, molded, shaped by forces beyond their understanding. And now the future of his species lay in his hands. He glanced down at the pulse rifle still gripped tightly in his hands, as if the familiar weight of the weapon could anchor him to some semblance of reality. But nothing felt real anymore. Not in the presence of the Queen. Not after the words she had spoken. She had told him to return to Earth, to lead humanity through the coming storm, but how could he do that? How could anyone face such an incomprehensible future without knowing the rules of the game? You will be the guide, she had said. If you prove worthy. But what did that mean? How could he prove worthy when he barely understood what the test was? And what would humanity's role be when the storm came? Captain, the Queen's voice broke through his thoughts, sharp and resonant. You cannot remain here forever. There are others who will seek you out, and you must be prepared for them. He turned to face her once again, his heart racing. Others? He asked, his voice hoarse. The Queen nodded slowly, her gaze intense and all-knowing. The forces I spoke of, the ones beyond your understanding, they are watching, waiting for you. They have seen your species, its drive, its hunger for expansion. And they will not remain passive. You must return to your people and ready them. Only when the time comes will you know what is truly at stake. Carter swallowed, his throat dry. It was clear now that he was no longer simply a soldier in a war. He was caught in something much larger, an ancient struggle, a cosmic test that no one on Earth could have ever imagined. The Zorith, for all their hostility, were not the true enemy. They were just the beginning. I'll return, Carter said, his voice tight with determination. I'll do what I can. But tell me, how do we prepare for something we don't even understand? The Queen's eyes glowed brighter, her mandibles shifting in what could almost be described as a smile. You will not face this alone, Captain. There are others who have been chosen like you. You will find them along the way. Before he could respond, the chamber around him began to shift. The walls, once fixed in place, began to move, expanding and contracting, as if the entire ship was breathing. Carter felt a strange, disorienting pull in his chest, and suddenly he was no longer standing before the Queen. The world around him had shifted, and he was standing alone in a small, dark room, the air stale and cold. What the hell? Carter muttered, his hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. But it was gone. The familiar weight had vanished, and he was left with nothing but his own thoughts and the overwhelming sense that something had changed. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, Carter realized the room wasn't entirely unfamiliar. It was a part of the alien ship, a smaller, hidden compartment, one he hadn't seen before. But it wasn't just the physical surroundings that had changed. Something deep inside him had shifted, as though the very fabric of his being had been altered. Before he could contemplate what this meant, a low hum filled the room, followed by a sudden flash of light. A figure materialized in front of him, a humanoid shape shrouded in swirling blue energy. It was a person, or something that resembled one, but Carter could feel that this was no human being. The figure stood tall, its outline shimmering and fluctuating as if it was made of pure energy. The figure spoke, its voice simultaneously familiar and alien, echoing in his mind. Captain Carter, you have been chosen. Carter's heart skipped a beat. Chosen? By who? What is this? The figure's shimmering form rippled as it took a step forward. You are not alone, Captain. There are others like you, humans who have been awakened to the truth. You have been brought here because the future of your species is entwined with those who walk among the stars. You are part of a greater plan, a test of endurance and transformation. Carter blinked, trying to process the overwhelming flood of information. I don't understand. What do you mean by transformation? What is this test? The figure's form shimmered, and for a brief moment, Carter thought he saw something that resembled a face, human in shape but alien in its expression. The test is not just one of survival. It is a test of adaptation, of transcendence. The forces that seek to shape your future are not concerned with your physical form, but with the potential that lies within you. Will you rise above your limitations, or will you fall into obscurity? The room seemed to pulse with energy as the figure continued, its voice growing more urgent. The Zorith have been one test. But there are others who will seek you out, forces older than the Zorith, forces that have watched your species since its birth. They will come, and when they do you must be ready. But you will not face them alone, Captain. There are others who share your path, and together you will either evolve or be erased. Carter's mind was a whirl of questions, but before he could speak, the figure raised a hand, and the room around him flickered again. The hum grew louder, and the figure's voice echoed one final time in his mind. You are not alone, Captain Carter. You will find the others. And together you will change the fate of your world. The light flared one last time, and when it faded, Carter was back in the vast chamber with the Zorith Queen. She sat silently, watching him with an inscrutable expression, as if expecting him to understand something he could not yet grasp. What just happened? Carter asked, his voice barely a whisper. The Queen's voice was calm, but there was an undeniable weight behind her words. You have been marked, Captain. You have seen a glimpse of what lies ahead. The path you must walk is not a simple one. But it is the only one that leads to your species' survival. Carter stared at the Queen, his mind racing. The figure, the message, it was clear now. This was no longer just about defeating an alien invader. It was about something much larger. Something ancient. Something that would either destroy humanity or elevate them to a new existence. He didn't know where to start or how to prepare. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The test had begun. Captain Elias Carter's heart hammered in his chest as the Zorith Queen's words echoed in his mind. He could still feel the presence of the strange figure, shimmering, intangible, yet undeniably real. The message was clear. He had been chosen not just to lead humanity's defense, but to find others who shared his destiny. It was no longer a matter of military tactics or simple survival. This was something far beyond his understanding. An ancient, cosmic plan that would decide whether humanity rose to greatness or was wiped out. He looked at the Queen, still seated on her grotesque throne, her violet eyes studying him with an inscrutable intensity. There was a time when his instinct would have been to draw his weapon, to fight for the survival of humanity at all costs. But now he wasn't sure what he was even fighting for. You are silent, Captain, the Queen said, her voice oddly comforting yet tinged with a subtle cruelty. You have received the first part of your awakening. The path ahead is fraught with uncertainty, but you must walk it, no matter the cost. Carter shook his head, trying to process what had just transpired. The Zorith, the strange figure, the cryptic message, it was all too much. What do you want from me? What exactly do you think I can do? The Queen tilted her head, considering him as though she were a teacher assessing a student's potential. What you can do is more than you realize. You will lead, Captain. You will seek out those who have been chosen as you have. Together, you will be a force of change, or you will fall, and your species will be forgotten. I don't even know where to start, Carter muttered, pacing as he struggled to make sense of everything. How can I find these other people? How do I know who they are? The Queen's mandibles clicked slowly. You will know them when the time is right. They are scattered across the stars, each touched by the forces that seek to shape your fate. But you are the first to understand what this test truly is. The others are still blind. Carter's mind raced, trying to wrap itself around the enormity of the task ahead. He had trained for battle, for war, for leadership in the trenches. But this was beyond anything he could have prepared for. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a key player in something that could alter the course of the entire human race. I need to return to Earth, he said, the words suddenly solidifying in his mind. I need to warn them, prepare them for what's coming. We'll need more than just soldiers. We'll need to find these people, understand what they know, and begin this transformation, whatever it is. The Queen's eyes flickered with something close to amusement. You may not be ready to return just yet, Captain. There are things you must do before you can leave my ship. Carter frowned. What things? The Queen's voice was softer now, as though she were speaking to a pupil. There are trials to be faced before you can unite with those you seek. Only by overcoming them can you begin to unlock your true potential. You will face challenges that will push you beyond your limits, mental, physical, and spiritual. But do not fear. You will not be alone. Carter's stomach clenched. Trials. More tests. The Zorith had already cost him so much, and now it seemed that their true challenge had only just begun. And how do I begin these trials? You will begin them by leaving this chamber, the Queen replied, her voice suddenly more distant, more commanding. Follow the path ahead. There are others aboard this ship, those who will test you. Only by passing their trials will you be ready to return to your people. Carter nodded grimly. The weight of her words pressed down on him, but there was no turning back. He was in this now, whether he understood it or not. He turned and made his way toward the farthest end of the chamber, where a dark passageway stretched into shadow. As he walked, the quiet hum of the ship seemed to grow louder, filling his mind with a strange sense of purpose. There was no telling what awaited him on the other side, but it was clear that he couldn't face the future without first confronting the tests laid out before him. The passage was long and narrow, winding deeper into the heart of the Zorith ship. Carter's senses were on high alert as he moved cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the silence. His pulse rifle, left behind in the Queen's chamber, felt like an almost comforting weight that he couldn't shake off. But the Queen had told him that survival here would require more than weapons. After what felt like hours, the path ahead opened into a vast chamber, one much larger than the Queen's throne room. A low, constant hum reverberated through the walls, and strange, glowing symbols danced across the surfaces of the room. At the center, 3 figures stood, their forms shrouded in shadow, waiting. Carter stepped forward, his body tense. The figures remained still, but the air around them seemed to vibrate with power, as though they were not quite human, not quite anything he could name. One of the figures stepped forward, its shape flickering like an image in a broken mirror. Its voice was low and gravelly, yet unmistakably clear. Captain Elias Carter, it intoned as if it had known his name for centuries. You seek to unite with others, to prepare your people for what is coming. But you cannot lead if you do not understand the nature of your strength. Carter's mouth went dry. What do you mean? The figure tilted its head, studying him. Your mind is sharp, but it is clouded. You think of war as the means to survival. But war is the tool of the weak. The true strength of humanity lies within its adaptability, its ability to transcend its limitations, to rise to the challenges of the universe, to evolve. Another figure, this one taller and more imposing, spoke next, its voice resonating in a way that made Carter's chest rattle. This trial will test your mind. We will show you that survival is not won on the battlefield, but within the very core of who you are. We will push you, Captain. Push you until you break, until you evolve. Only then can you lead. Carter clenched his fists. He wasn't sure what kind of test they were talking about, but he knew that if he was going to survive this, if humanity was going to survive, it would have to be with everything he had. He had no choice but to face this trial, no matter how it would change him. The third figure stepped forward, its form hazy and indistinct, its voice softer than the others. Your journey is only just beginning. You must trust yourself, Captain. And when you do, you will find your way. Without another word, the figures faded into the shadows, leaving Carter alone in the vast, humming chamber. His breath was shallow, his heart pounding in his chest. The test had begun, but it was clear now that the stakes were higher than he could have imagined. And so, with no other choice, he stepped forward, ready to face whatever awaited him. Captain Elias Carter stood alone in the darkened chamber, the last echoes of the figure's cryptic words still reverberating in his mind. The true strength of humanity lies within its adaptability, one had said. Another spoke of transcendence, evolution. The weight of it all pressed down on him like a storm about to break. He had always believed that survival came from strength. The strength of the human will, the strength of their weapons, their tactics. But now, those very things were being called into question. A deep hum reverberated through the chamber, and the walls began to shift again, the strange symbols glowing brighter as if reacting to something unseen. Carter's instincts kicked in, his body coiling tight as he prepared for whatever came next. But nothing happened immediately. The stillness stretched on, oppressive and heavy. The silence felt like an eternity, broken only by the steady beat of his heart and the hum of the ship's unseen power. Then, out of the shadows, a new presence materialized, this one not a figure or a being but a force. It was as if the room itself was alive, suffused with energy that Carter could not fully comprehend. He braced himself, but the force didn't approach him. Instead, it expanded, filling the room with a tangible pressure, a pressure that seemed to push against him from every direction. A voice filled the air, not from any one being but from the very essence of the room itself. You seek strength. You seek survival. But strength is not what you think it is, Captain Carter. Strength is not in the battle. Strength is in the self. Carter's brow furrowed. What does that mean? How can survival be in the self? We're fighting a war, not meditating. The voice did not respond directly to his words, but the pressure in the room intensified, and suddenly the walls of the chamber seemed to blur and distort, bending reality itself. His vision flickered and the room before him began to change. The dark, sterile environment faded away, replaced by something familiar, his own childhood home. The streets of his hometown, the small, modest house where he had grown up, and the faces of his parents, standing at the door as if waiting for him. He blinked, his pulse quickening. How was this possible? He hadn't thought about this place in years. The past he had buried deep beneath the weight of his military career, his battles, his responsibilities. And yet there it was, his home. His mother's gentle smile, his father's firm hand, the life he had left behind when he joined the military. The life that had shaped him, but that he had never truly examined. Mom? Carter called out, his voice shaky. She smiled warmly, her eyes filled with love. Elias, we've been waiting for you. But there was something wrong. The smile seemed too perfect, too staged. Carter's chest tightened as he stepped closer. His father appeared beside her, but his face was different. There was something cold in his eyes, something unsettling. And as Carter looked around, the world around him began to distort again. The warm home he had once known seemed to close in on him, the walls pressing in from all sides. This is the heart of your trial, Captain? The voice filled his mind, echoing like 1,000 whispers. What is this? Carter gasped, backing away from his parents. The air around him seemed to warp, thickening as if he were suffocating. This is the past. The memories you have buried deep. The thoughts you have avoided. They are the foundation of your strength, Elias. Your survival. The room spun as memories crashed over him. Not just of his childhood, but of every battle, every decision that had led him here. His old squadmates, their faces flashing in his mind, some of them still alive, others long dead. The sacrifices made, the pain endured, the things he had done to survive. You have clung to these memories, Captain. To these people. But they are not the source of your strength. They are your chains. His parents' faces contorted, their features shifting into something monstrous. The warmth and love he had once felt turned into suffocating oppression. Carter's chest tightened with panic as his world twisted around him. The room collapsed into darkness and he fell to his knees, gasping for air. In order to lead, you must confront the truth. The truth of who you are and what you have become. Only then can you evolve. The voice was no longer distant, it was inside his mind, tearing at his soul. Carter's fists clenched as he fought against the overwhelming pressure, but it was no use. The truth he had avoided was now laid bare, forcing him to face his deepest fears, his insecurities. The person he had become, this soldier, this leader, had he truly grown? Or had he simply become a shell of the boy who once dreamed of a different life? He stood, trembling in the darkness, surrounded by nothing but the weight of his own thoughts. The trial was not an external force, it was his own mind, his own heart, the very essence of who he had been. He realized then that this was what the figures had meant. Strength was not in the things he had done or the battles he had won. It was in his ability to accept the truth of who he was. You must let go, Elias, the voice whispered, softer now, almost compassionate. Let go of the man you think you should be. Accept the man you are. Carter's breath came in ragged gasps as he slowly allowed the weight of the truth to settle over him. He had always believed that survival meant pushing forward, never looking back, never questioning. But the trial was clear now. In order to lead, to survive the tests ahead, he had to confront the parts of himself he had left behind. The fears, the guilt, the trauma. And so, in the darkness, Carter did what he had avoided for so long. He let go. The memories of his past, the faces, the regrets, faded away not as a rejection but as an acceptance. He wasn't abandoning them. He was freeing himself from their grip. The room began to change again. The pressure lifted, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Carter felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. A strange clarity washed over him and he stood tall, his heart steady. The voice spoke again, now full of warmth. "You are ready now, Captain Elias Carter. The first trial has been passed. But there are more to come. Only through accepting yourself can you hope to lead others." With a deep breath, Carter stepped forward, the darkness lifting from his mind. The trial had changed him. It wasn't the strength he had expected, the battle he had thought he needed to fight. It was something far more fundamental. He had faced his inner demons and he had emerged stronger for it. As the chamber around him faded into the background, Carter knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But he was ready. The test of humanity had begun and he would not fail. Captain Elias Carter stood at the precipice, his mind now clear and sharp, the burden of his past no longer weighing him down. The trial of self had forced him to confront parts of himself he had long buried, but it had also given him the strength to move forward. The room that had once been a battleground for his emotions now seemed to fade into the distance, replaced by a profound silence that resonated deep within his soul. But even as the echoes of his inner struggles settled, a new sensation washed over him, an unmistakable pull, a call to something greater. He knew instinctively that his journey was far from over. He had passed the first trial, but there were others awaiting him. The Zorith Queen had said as much, and the figures on the ship had hinted at the challenges yet to come. He took a deep breath and the darkness around him began to shift. The once oppressive chamber was now bathed in a soft, ethereal glow. The symbols on the walls flickered with light, as if responding to his awakening, to his transformation. The hum of the ship reverberated like a heartbeat, resonating in harmony with his own. This was no longer a place of fear. It was a place of possibility. A figure materialized before him, not one of the shadowed beings who had tested him, but something different. It was humanoid in shape, but its features were luminous, its form shifting and fluid like a being made of light itself. Its presence was not threatening but rather awe-inspiring. "You have completed the trial, Elias Carter," the being intoned, its voice both gentle and commanding. "You have shed the weight of your past and embraced the truth within. But the question remains, what will you do with this newfound strength?" Carter stood tall, his body no longer tense with uncertainty. "I will do whatever is necessary to lead humanity, to ensure we have a future." The being nodded, a soft radiance rippling through its form. "You understand now that leadership is not about power, nor about commanding armies. It is about guiding others to their fullest potential, showing them the path when they are lost, and standing firm in the face of the unknown. You have the strength to do this, but the next trial will test your resolve. It will test your ability to shape not only your own future but the future of those you lead." Carter's heart beat faster, but he was no longer afraid. He had faced his own darkness. Now he was ready to face whatever challenges awaited him. He had a mission, a purpose, and the clarity to see it through. "What is this next trial?" Carter asked, his voice steady even in the face of the unknown. The being's glowing eyes met his, and its voice was filled with a kind of solemnity that gave weight to its words. "The next trial is not one of the mind but of the soul. You will be shown what your people are truly capable of. You will see their strengths and their flaws, their potential and their weaknesses. And you must decide, Captain, whether you are willing to accept them for who they are, or whether you will try to change them into something they are not." Before Carter could respond, the being gestured and the space around them shimmered. The chamber dissolved and Carter found himself standing on the surface of a vast, barren world. The ground beneath his feet was cracked, and the sky overhead was a swirling mass of storm clouds. He could feel the weight of the desolation around him, the overwhelming sense of a world on the brink of collapse. And then, from the storm, figures began to appear, humans. But not the humans Carter had known, not the soldiers he had trained with or the civilians he had fought to protect. These were different. They were scattered, desperate, and broken. Some of them wore ragged clothes, others were covered in strange alien markings. Their eyes were wild with fear, and their movements were erratic, as if they were disconnected from the world around them. Carter took a step forward and one of them looked up at him, recognition flickering in their eyes. It was a face he recognized, his sister Claire. But her appearance was far different from the woman he remembered. She looked gaunt, haunted, her skin pale and cracked. She stepped toward him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. "Elias," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is it really you?" Carter's heart clenched in his chest. This was impossible. Claire had died years ago, killed in one of the early skirmishes in the war. And yet, here she was, alive, or at least alive in some twisted form. His mind raced, but the being's voice cut through his thoughts. These are the people you are fighting for, Elias Carter. These are the ones who depend on you. What will you do? Will you accept them as they are, or will you try to change them? You have the power to guide them, but only if you are willing to see them for who they are. Carter's mind swirled with emotion, but he took a deep breath, steadying himself. He looked at his sister, at the broken, fragile version of her, and felt the pang of grief. She was a reflection of the people he had sworn to protect, those who had been left behind, struggling in a war they didn't understand. They were fractured, lost, but they were still human, still worth saving. He stepped forward, extending a hand toward Claire. "I'm here," he said softly, his voice filled with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "I'm here, Claire. We're going to find a way to fix this. Together." The moment he touched her hand, the world around them began to shift. The desolation receded, replaced by a glimmer of hope. The storm clouds parted, and the barren ground began to heal, cracks mending as life slowly returned to the world. The humans around him, once broken and lost, began to stand straighter, their expressions softening as if a spark of hope had been rekindled within them. The being appeared beside him, its form shimmering with approval. "You have passed the trial of the soul, Elias Carter. You have chosen to accept your people, flaws and all. You have chosen to lead not by force but by understanding, by empathy. And it is through this that you will rise." The storm had cleared, and the world around Carter was no longer a desolate wasteland, but a place full of promise and possibility. He had chosen not to fight against his people, but to fight with them, to help them rise above their weaknesses and fears. He had seen the truth, that true leadership was not about molding others into what he wanted them to be, but about embracing who they were and guiding them toward their greatest potential. The being faded into the light, leaving Carter standing alone in the now peaceful landscape, but no longer alone in purpose. He had passed the final trial and with it had unlocked the true strength of humanity. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Elias Carter felt ready to face it. Captain Elias Carter stood alone in the heart of the transformed world, the echoes of the last trial still fresh in his mind. The storm had cleared, the desolate land healed. The humans around him, once broken and desperate, now stood tall, their faces filled with hope. They were no longer the fractured remnants of war, they were the future, a people who had the potential to rise from the ashes. But Carter knew, deep in his heart, that his journey was not yet complete. The trial of the soul had shown him the truth. Humanity's true strength lay in its ability to adapt, to overcome, and to rise together. But there was one final challenge awaiting him, one that would define the future of his people. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The ethereal hum of the ship still vibrated in the air, like a pulse, resonating with the very core of his being. The glow that had bathed the world faded, and once again he was back in the chamber, the place where it had all begun. The walls shimmered, the symbols now glowing softly as the figures who had guided him through each trial began to materialize before him once more. This time there were no shadows, no dark figures to test him. Instead, the beings appeared as radiant, towering forms, their presence awe-inspiring. They looked not at him with judgment but with something more, perhaps respect, perhaps anticipation. They had watched him face his trials and now they were waiting for the final answer. "You have passed the trials of mind, of heart, and of soul, Captain Elias Carter," the lead figure said, its voice echoing with the wisdom of countless eons. "But now we ask you this final question. Will you carry the legacy of humanity forward? Will you shape the future of your people and of the universe, or will you let the flaws of the past continue to haunt you?" Carter's eyes narrowed. The weight of the question hit him like a tidal wave, but he knew the answer. He had already made it. It was not the trials that had shaped him. It was the realization that humanity's greatest strength had always been its capacity for change. The past, with all its mistakes and scars, would never be erased. But the future? That was something they could still shape, still strive for, together. "I will carry humanity's legacy forward," Carter said, his voice steady and strong. "But I will do it with the lessons we have learned. We are not perfect. We will stumble, we will fail. But we will rise again. We will rise as one." The figures nodded in unison, their forms shifting like waves of energy, rippling through the chamber. Carter could feel the weight of their approval, the culmination of all the trials. This was not just about him anymore. This was about humanity, about every person who had fought, every soul who had endured, and every future they could now build. "You have chosen wisely, Captain," the lead figure said. "Your strength, your wisdom, and your compassion will carry your people into the future. But there is one final gift we must give you, an understanding of the vast potential that lies within your people, within yourself. A wave of energy surged through the room and Carter felt it, an awakening deep within his mind, a sudden clarity. The figures around him dissolved, leaving only a single glowing orb hovering in the center of the chamber. It pulsed with light and Carter reached out instinctively, his hand connecting with the orb. In that moment he felt the weight of the universe itself, billions of minds, countless possibilities, and the infinite potential that humanity held. You will lead them, the voice whispered, but this time, it was not just the figures speaking. It was as if the voice itself had become one with the universe, the collective knowledge of eons flowing through Carter's veins. But know this, Elias Carter, the legacy of humanity is not only in the future you create. It is in the choices you make every day. Every person you inspire, every soul you uplift, and every decision you make will echo through time. You will guide your people not by force but by the strength of your example. You will show them the path of unity, of peace, and of purpose. The orb flickered with light and Carter could see visions, glimpses of the future. He saw cities rebuilt, communities united, minds and hearts working together toward a common goal. He saw humanity reaching for the stars, not as conquerors but as explorers. He saw a new era for his people, one where the mistakes of the past would not be forgotten, but used as the foundation for a brighter tomorrow. The visions faded, leaving Carter standing alone in the now silent chamber. He knew in that moment that the trials had been a test, not just of his strength but of his heart and his ability to see beyond the present. Humanity had always been flawed, always in conflict, always struggling to find its way. But in those struggles, in the very essence of what it meant to be human, lay their true power. They were a people capable of change, of growth, of redemption. And he, Elias Carter, would lead them. The chamber around him began to dissolve, the glowing symbols vanishing into the ether. But as the last remnants of the trial faded, he could hear the voice again, this time not in his mind but in the very air itself. You are ready, Elias Carter. The future is yours to shape. With those final words, the chamber was gone, and Carter stood once more on the surface of the healed world. The people around him, his people, looked to him with hope and determination in their eyes. They were waiting for him to lead them, to show them the way. But Carter knew now that leadership wasn't about standing alone at the front. It wasn't about being the strongest or the most decisive. It was about being a guide, a beacon of hope, and a reminder that even in the darkest of times, humanity had the power to rise again. As he stood there, with the sky above him now clear and bright, Elias Carter felt the weight of his responsibility and the immense potential of his people. The trials had shaped him, but they had also shown him the truth. The real strength of humanity was not in any single individual, but in the collective will of all. And it was that collective will that would carry them into the future. The journey ahead would be difficult, but Carter knew he was no longer alone. Humanity was ready. And together they would rise. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.